Alaskans, wherever you are, welcome to the Must Read Alaska Show. Coming to you from somewhere in Alaska. This is the place where we talk about, you guessed it, Alaska. Where we keep the mainstream media on their toes and where we are standing up for what's right in a world run by leftists. You can find out more by heading over to mustreadalaska.com and also checking out the Must Read Alaska YouTube channel for some really great content. But first, let's get this party started.
Welcome, everybody, to the Must Read Alaska Show. I'm your host, John Quick, coming to you live from somewhere in Alaska. I hope everybody's having a phenomenal Monday morning. Man, fall is in the air. Leaves are falling down. Crisp temperatures out there. It's nice that Alaska gets at least a 2-week breather for having a beautiful spring and then quickly winter behind that for 6 months or 7 months or so. We have election season in our midst, and Must Read Alaska this year is doing a special thing where we highlight candidates. Doesn't matter if they're Democrat, Republican, nonpartisan, libertarian, everything in between. If you go to the Must Read Alaska Facebook page, pinned to the top there, there's a link. I think we have a couple slots left still, maybe, and you can sign up for 10, 15, 20-minute interview talking about why you're running, what you care about, and what you do if you first couple days in office if you won, and would love to have you on the Must Read Alaska Show. Today, we have a very special guest, my own representative who's running for state senate now, Representative Ben Carpenter. Welcome to the Must Read Alaska Show.
Good to be with you, John. Thanks for having me back.
Well, I'm excited you're here today. You're in the capacity of running for a new office, and excited to hear a little bit about the what, why, and how you're doing that. But first, tell folks who you are and what you're running for here in the great state of Alaska.
Thanks, John. I appreciate the opportunity to share with your readers what's going on here in Senate District D on the Kenai Peninsula. My name is Ben Carpenter. I'm running for the state Senate. I currently sit in the House seat for District 8, which is the northern Kenai Peninsula, everywhere from Nikiski to Sterling. I am a 21-year military veteran. I got off active duty Army in 2013 and went into business. My family put roots down literally in Nikiski, my hometown, and we put in a peony field. So we manage and operate a peony field to this day, where we're cutting and exporting cut flower peonies during the summer. And I've been in the legislature for the past 6 years.
Nice.
My family's originally from Washington State, but I moved up here when I was like 9 years old. So graduated high school. Alaska's been my home, and I've had an Alaska driver's license most of my life. So I love being home.
That's awesome. So what made you throw your name in the hat? Because some people would think, man, he's crazy. He's the, House rep. He could probably run again for House and, probably win by a landslide again, or, nobody would even run against you. You'd win by a landslide. What made you mix it up and run for Senate?
Thanks, John. I believe, the voters obviously get a say in this, and you can never take an election for granted. But the last election I ran unopposed, and I have a real strong support in District 8 as a House member, and I believe I will as a Senate candidate as well. And it was somewhat of a political risk for me to jump from the House to the Senate, but I think that it's really important. The reason why I did that is tied to what I intend to do and what I think needs to happen for the health of the state of Alaska. I've been pushing a long-term fiscal plan, long-term fiscal improvements for the state that focuses on economic development. We've got some significant hurdles that continue to be put in our place, or are part of our structure, that are in our way, and the legislature continues to not deal with them. One of the things that's happening is we're getting rid of the permanent fund dividend. It's likely to be consumed with state spending in just a matter of years if we keep spending the way we are. And much of that decision making is happening in the Senate. We have a state that is center right. I believe that. You've got a Republican governor elected. You've got 2 Republican senators elected to the U.S. Senate. We are still a center right state, and yet our Senate in the state Senate has a center left leaning. You've got a bunch of Republicans that joined with a majority Democrat coalition in this last legislature and thwarted a bunch of things that both the Republicans in the House wanted to get done and what the Republican governor wanted to get done. And so I really do feel like we need to have some change in people in the U.S. or in the Senate, state Senate, if we're going to see some change that betters our fiscal picture for the state. So that's, in a nutshell, why I'm doing it. Me replacing the incumbent is not going to make all of the change. We have to replace several of the other incumbents, and I'm looking at those races across the state, and I'm hopeful that Alaskans will see that they need to replace the players in the Senate, just like they did 6 years ago when I came into the House. Remember, we were dealing with a Muskox coalition with a similar mindset where Republicans were empowering Democrats and the House was leaning to the left. Well, it took 2 election cycles and we swapped out 2/3 of the House members in those 2 elections. Well, we got to do that again, and it starts with this election.
So I think I know the answer to this, but I think it'd be good for folks that are in the Senate district to hear directly from you instead of hearing about it, maybe through Facebook ads or radio ads. But
That's
do
always
you
best.
support a bunch of new taxes? Tell me your stance on that.
No, I'm specifically against any new taxes as a method to solve our fiscal problems. Right? We've got to realize that Alaskans are being taxed right now. Not only are mom and dad being taxed, but kids are being taxed because their dividend is shrinking, and it will go away because we don't have a solution to government spending. Right? As government spends, right now the state legislature only has one source of revenue to come after. That's the permanent fund earnings. So we have to have a structural change that includes a spending limit, meaning the state government can't spend all of the money it has at its disposal just because it wants to. It is limited to a reasonable growth. And we had a constitutional provision this last legislature to do that, and it tied the growth of government to the growth of the economy. So if your GDP raises, if your population goes up, then you're able to spend more. But if you've got a declining population like we have now, stagnant to declining, and a declining GDP, it makes no sense for us to grow state government if the GDP or our economy is suffering. So you're not going to get me voting for any sort of new tax if we can't have some fiscal change that includes a spending limit, and it also includes paying a dividend by statute. And the crazy thing is that if Alaskans would agree to change their overall structure, how the legislature is financing itself, financing the budget, they would end up paying less in taxes with a statewide sales tax than they would if they just paid for state government with their permanent fund dividend. We've got a lot of people that come into the state of Alaska as visitors, and they use state services, they use the police, they use the roads, they are contributing nothing to the state budget, and that's what a statewide sales tax would help with. So you'll get my support on a fiscal plan that includes a spending limit and paying a full PFD, statutory PFD, and a sales tax if that's what is necessary. But I'm not solving our state problems, and our state problems are not going to get solved by additional spending. That's what the left would like to do. They would just like to institute an income tax and spend more. But that's not what is going to help our economic engine get restarted. We need to provide predictability and a reliable fiscal structure to our state budget. And right now, the oil industry has got the big old target on their back. They're not the only, but they're the largest industry that gets taxed in the state of Alaska. About just under 20% of our state revenue comes from oil taxes. Well, about 33% of our state revenue comes from permanent fund earnings now, and 40% comes from federal dollars. Those are the 3 sources of money we fight over every year. We don't even talk about economic growth because it doesn't matter to our state budget. It doesn't matter. You could have companies come in. You could have an increase in small business in your communities, it'd be wonderful for your local community, but it isn't going to help the state budget at all. So we need to control our spending and be smart about who pays taxes. Right now, the majority of Alaskans who are receiving their dividend are paying the taxes. They just don't see it. So it needs to be more transparent who's paying taxes.
Nice. So one of the questions I always ask folks that come on to this kind of candidate spotlight forum is, what separates you from your opponent? You know, if anybody is, if you're not living under a rock on the Kenai Peninsula, you've heard radio ads and Facebook ads and all these kinds of things, but I want to hear directly from you, what separates you from your opponent?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We both have R's behind our name, but that's about as far as it goes, with similarities, I think. The major difference here is that, 2/3 of his money that he's raised has come from out of district. Over half of it's from PACs and individuals tied to state spending. So the lobby, the Juneau lobby, right? We're talking about special interests, are lining up and lining his pockets for this campaign. And that's what separates us. I don't have those people supporting me. The special interests do not want to see me go to Juneau. They want to see my opponent go to Juneau. He's a card-carrying member of the National Education Association. He's on contract with the local school district. He's supporting pro-government spending at the state legislature. He says that he wants to have a PFD that we can afford, which is code for when we can't afford it, then we won't have one. But education spending and an increased return to a defined benefits program for state employee retirement is something that he's proposing. Well, that's just going to cost us more, which means you're going to reduce the dividend. It's the only place we go to pay for additional spending. So if you want to empower the special interests in Juneau, then you vote for my opponent. If you want to challenge the special interests, then you vote for me. That's as simple. We need, the state of Alaska and the Kenai Peninsula need good teachers in our schools more than the state Senate needs a union member as a member of the legislature. Let the unions hire their lobbyists and lobby the legislature like everybody else has to. Why do they get an actual seated member of the state Senate? That's just wrong. It's a conflict of interest. So that in a nutshell, I think is what the next legislature is going to be about, those issues. And that's what separates him from me in that regard.
So I think sometimes, elected officials, House, Senate, local assembly, city council, they head off to office. And then, when election time comes up, they kind of hold up this thing and say, look at all these laws I've created. You've been a guy that hasn't really created a bunch of new laws that, are going to be on the books. And I think that speaks to the folks you represent, people in Nikiski and the surrounding areas. They don't want a bunch of new government laws. Tell me kind of your method or philosophy behind being the guy that doesn't just create a bunch of new laws for everybody.
Well, I actually believe what Ronald Reagan said is that you can get a lot of things done if you don't care who gets the credit. So there are plenty of people in the state legislature who will champion what I will call small bills. They're 1 or 2 page bills. They're simple bills to get low threat, not really a big deal. People are going to support them. I have never really focused on those types of bills because I know there's people out there that'll carry them and work on them. What I have done is tried to move mountains. I want to tackle the largest problems that the state has. And that's why I've championed several bills that have been slow to get support within the legislature. But these are issues that are going to take multiple years to address, not just a single legislative session. And, for example, I said, in the 6 years that I've been in the legislature, I recognize that cutting the budget is not something that we're going to be successful at. The lobby is just too strong in Juneau to make any substantial reductions in state spending, right? And frankly, how are you going to, when the two departments that you have to reduce spending in to make any substantial change is education and Medicaid, right? The way to get to reduce spending is through better efficiency and better management of state government. And we are a government that could benefit greatly from better management. So, and that includes our budget process. So I said, you know what, let's find out how other states are dealing with improving their state government. And we championed a bill, and Senator Shelley Hughes sponsored this bill in the Senate. And this is a similar bill to hers. And it was creating a sunset commission similar to the Texas Sunset Commission. And there's a handful of other states that have a sunset commission. And you empower commissioners that are appointed by the governor and the presiding officers of the legislature to do a deep dive over time into each one of our departments. So how you're going to get better results out of the Department of Education and Department of Health is by putting a commission in charge of doing a deep dive into the bureaucracy and figuring out, spending the time and figuring out what it is that needs to be improved. And then those recommendations get sent to the governor and they get sent to the legislature. And if they don't act upon it, if the legislature doesn't act upon those recommendations, then that entity that they looked at would sunset the following year. It would go away. So it provides the teeth. Like, we don't want to get rid of the Department of Education in the state of Alaska or the Department of Public Safety, but we do want the legislature to care about making some improvements. And we're just out of bandwidth. We do not have the time or the subject matter expertise to do a deep dive into any one of our departments very deep during the legislative season, during those 5 months we're in Juneau. You know, we get 400 bills before us to consider, and we're focused more on that than we are on improving the state government. But the legislature is ultimately in charge of what our state government looks like. I know that the governor is responsible for executing, but defining what our government is supposed to do is the purview of the legislature. So we need to empower a tool that is similar to the Texas Sunset Commission to do a deep dive and improve our state government. I believe out of the 6 years that I've been in the legislature and 4 years on finance, that we've got somewhere between $800 million and $1 billion of savings that we could make if we focused on better managing our government. You know, for example, we identified this last legislature, we identified $300 million that's appropriated, was appropriated in this budget for positions that were vacant. These are state positions authorized to hire somebody, but they were vacant. And you look back over time, and the oldest position was, I think it was a Department of Fish and Game position from 2014. That was the last time that anybody had been hired in that position. Yet we continue to appropriate money and fund that position every year since. So something's going on. The legislature shouldn't be just appropriating a blanket $300 million for positions that may or may not get filled. And then we have no accountability on how that money gets spent. So there is great opportunity for us to rein in our spending through better management. Another example of that, so that if people need more than one, through our budget process, the legislature is supposed to be telling the administration, telling the departments what their measures of success are. So when they come to us asking for money each year, they should be tying that money request to how did they spend the money last year and how did they successfully accomplish the mission. It's hit or miss as to whether we get that information from departments. That's currently in statute, and I authored a bill to strengthen that so that when we come to a budget conversation, if we were ever to get to a zero-based budget where we're starting over every year and the departments are justifying the money that they're asking for in the next budget, we would have to have some conversation about how they're justifying that spending, and that is requiring them to go to the measurements, the performance measures that they should be using, and any major corporation is going to be using performance measures for their budgeting process. But the state of Alaska, our budget process is not built upon or built around performance measures. So that needs to change if we're going to see more accountability within state government. with more accountability comes a less expensive state government. I believe that that's the only way we're going to get to it. If you saw in 2019, or remember what happened when Governor Dunleavy put forward his bill that cut about $1 billion out of the budget. Well, all hell broke loose in Juneau. They did not want to see those cuts made, and the governor had a recall put against him because of that. So I think a lot of legislators now see what happened in 2019, if they're still in, and they're a little gun shy about making any kind of major cuts in state government, because that's what's going to happen. The government is going to come after them, and it's just going to be painful. So we have to approach this as adults. We have to say, we need a better fiscal plan going forward. We need to be smart about who's paying our taxes. We need to be smart about how the permanent fund earnings are being spent, and not discount what $1.8 billion, which is 50% of your POMV draw, means to the private sector. When Alaskans spend their dividend in small businesses, whether they're buying clothes, whether they're buying heating oil, whether they're buying four-wheelers, whatever it is that they're buying it through small business in Alaska. And those transactions matter. Take that $1.8 billion and give it directly to government to pay for state services in lieu of a tax, and you take $1.8 billion out of the private sector and out of Alaskans' hands when they're spending it in private industry. And that is not healthy for our economy. So we need to be smarter about who's paying taxes. And I think, I mean, look at it from a local perspective as well. How many people take their dividend and they pay their property taxes with them? I do. Be complete transparent. That's usually what my dividend goes towards, is paying property taxes. Okay. So what happens when we don't get a dividend and we still have local property taxes to pay? Where's that money coming from? And how do you not call that a tax increase on somebody? It will be. It is. It will do away with the dividend, and it will pinch people more than what they're being pinched now with a declining economy. So we need to be smart about how we're doing our state government. You're not going to get that with somebody who's supported by the status quo and the special interests in Juneau. You'll continue to get that from me. I've been very consistent for 6 years.
So there's going to be folks here listening in. Maybe they're going to want to help out your campaign, hear more about you. Tell us all those details. Where can folks find you? Website, social media? Do you have any events coming up? Spill all the beans.
Yeah, thanks. So if you want to have a personal conversation, you can call me on my phone, 907-690-6494. You can also drop me an email at ben@carpenterforalaska.com. My website is bencarpenterforalaska.com. I am at Northern Lights Espresso in Soldotna every Wednesday morning from 9 to 11 a.m. And you're welcome to stop in. I'll buy you a cup of coffee. We'll have a conversation, and I hope you go away happy. If not, you'll go away more informed. We have virtual meetups on Zoom every Tuesday at 7 p.m. We just started this recently, and it's been very, very easy for people to sit in their own home and have a conversation with me. So if that's your cup of tea, then you can meet with us on there. Look to our Facebook account, our Facebook campaign page for the details on that. Our next meet and greet is going to be here in Nikiski at the Nikiski Community Center on Friday, September 20th, and that's at 5:30 p.m. That'll be a joint meet and greet with John Hillier, who I've endorsed to replace me in the House. And if you haven't met John, you really need to meet him. He's an outstanding professional that's going to bring an increased professionalism to the State House, and we sorely need that.
Awesome, Ben. Well, thank you so much for joining us here on the Must Read Alaska show. For folks listening in, maybe you just caught the tail end, I want to encourage you to go back and listen to the episode. I'll put all the links to all that stuff in the podcast description so folks can easily find them. And I hope everybody has a great rest of their week. Today is an awesome Monday morning. Fall is in the air, crisp air out there. Leaves are falling. Love fall time here in Alaska. We'll have a couple other guests this week on the Must Read Alaska show, so make sure to tune into that. Until next time, I'm John Quick from somewhere in Alaska.